Welcome to Fireside Giants. My name is Alex with my co-host here, Anthony Rivardo. Appreciate you guys coming back for another New York Giants video. And today we have an interesting topic on the line. This is really a wide receiver battle. The Giants had one of the weakest wide receiver units in the NFL in 2020. We had an undrafted free agent, Austin Mack, starting by the midway point, which is a pretty good indication of how weak and thin they really were. We started off the year with Sterling Shepard, who we love, and then Golden Tate, who was completely washed, didn't really offer much aside from the occasional nice catch. And then you have Darius Slayton, who I think was injured last year, but with all of this depth now, Kenny Golladay, Kadarius Toney, John Ross being added to the mix, there's a possibility that Darius Slayton finds himself maybe losing reps or starting. This is a really good position battle. I'm tired of the Giants handing out starting positions to players that maybe deserve them, but also just are given starting spots because there's nobody else to compete. Darius Slayton, while I think he's a great player and he's capable of being a high-end wide receiver too, he was given a starting job right out of college as a fifth-round pick, which sometimes would not be the case on more deep teams at the wide receiver position. And I think it's fair to say, is he going to be a starter this upcoming year? Is he a wide receiver 3, 4 on this team? Can John Ross compete with him to steal reps? And I'm interested to hear what Anthony has to say about this before we dive into this segment, my friend. How are you doing today?
I'm doing real good, and I'm excited to talk about Darius Slayton and the Giants wide receiving core as, a unit in general, because it's intriguing this year, because last year it was so bad. And now this year we have really high expectations for this receiving core because we added a lot of talent. Added the likes of Kenny Golladay, added the likes of Kadarius Toney, got rid of washed-up Golden Tate, but you still have Sterling Shepard, who should be healthier and ready to play a full season, and you still have Darius Slayton, who should be healthier and ready to play a full season. So I think that's going to be really exciting. There's a lot of different playmakers in this group for the Giants now, and they all kind of serve different purposes and do different things. So with Darius Slayton, it's kind of the question of, is he going to be kind of suppressed down into this bottom role, or is he still going to be able to play and see the field pretty frequently because he has been a good player through 2 years of his career despite being a fifth-round pick? I mean, for a fifth-round pick in 2019, he has been a phenomenal pick. I mean, he's exceeded all expectations. So will he continue to exceed those expectations, or will he fall into a fifth-round pick's role now that we've added more talent? That's the question mark for me for Darius Slayton going forward, and I'm excited to see exactly how he answers that question.
Well, we know in his rookie season he had 8 touchdowns. He was really one of our only bright spots during that 2019 campaign. But last year, he only had 3 games with over 60 yards, which is a big disappointment for a player that really has been the focal point in a downfield respect. Of course, Jason Garrett, his first year as the offensive coordinator, really cut back on sending the ball deep. I think Daniel Jones, under 10% of his throws were over 20-plus yards. Pretty good indication of how little he was actually utilizing the deep ball. But when you're looking at Darius Slayton, we always hit on Evan Ingram for drops, right? Evan Ingram was correlated to 6 interceptions last year. Darius Slayton dropped 6 passes in 2020, and he had a 10.7% drop rate, which is a significant problem. That's not something that we should completely overlook, but I wouldn't call it a significant problem. I'd call it, maybe an issue that's worth mentioning. And I think that he's going to kind of alleviate those problems. I think he was kind of trailing along the season with an injury in tow because he clearly wasn't at his full speed. He looked like he was kind of limping at times, gimpy at times, and I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt based on his rookie campaign. But there's no question in my mind he can be a wide receiver too. Last year, he only had 2 games with over 100 yards, came in week 1 against Pittsburgh with 102, which he had 2 touchdowns. That was 2 out of the 3 touchdowns he had all year were in week 1, averaged 17 yards per reception, and he was an absolute stud in that week 1 performance against Pittsburgh, one of the best defenses in the NFL. And that was like, okay, Darius Slayton's taking a step forward game. That was like the game that kind of said to us, okay, we're going to be okay at wide receiver. Darius Slayton looked like a WR1 in that game. His route running was good. He pushed the field. But then teams started to figure out that if they could overwhelm the offensive line and have a good speedy man coverage corner who could just keep up with Darius Slayton, they could mitigate his influence. But again, I think he was trailing with an injury because his breakaway speed did not look the same. He was running a lot more shorter routes. He wasn't pushing the field vertically as much. And the Giants, that's all they really could do because Daniel Jones didn't have the time in the pocket to even send the ball deep. The only other game he had over 100 yards was against Dallas in week 5 with 129 yards, 16.1 yards per reception. And he had 11 targets, 8 receptions. That was the most receptions he had in any game last year. But I'll tell you what, Anthony, when you're looking at him and John Ross, what player do you think gets the most reps here? How do you think they utilize these guys? Is it really a position battle between these two guys? Because they really are speed threats. That's their primary usage. I'd say Darius Slayton's a better route runner than John Ross, but John Ross in the open fields might be more of a home run hitter. He might be used as more of a gadget style player. How do you see them using these two guys? Do you think that there is a position battle that's ensuing during training camp?
I personally see no position battle between Darius Slayton and John Ross. I think Darius Slayton has proven himself far more than John Ross has, despite the fact that John Ross was a top 10 pick. John Ross has a lot of straight line speed. Of course, he broke the 40-yard dash record at his combine, but he has not proven that he can stay healthy, stay on the field, or do much of anything in terms of route running that Darius Slayton can't do. Slayton, let's not forget, 8 touchdown receptions in 2019 is kind of a ridiculously high total for a 5th-round rookie. That is a lot of touchdown receptions. I don't think the Giants had anyone come close to 8 touchdown receptions this season. Really, that is a high number and a really impressive number. If Kenny Galladay had 8 touchdown receptions this upcoming season, I'd be pretty happy with Kenny Galladay's production on the year. 8 touchdowns is a lot. That is a really, really solid number that I would be excited to see any wide receiver one really get to. Of course, your WR1, you want to see them get to double digits, but if they get to 8 with 1,500 yards or 1,200 yards or whatever, you're pretty ecstatic about that. So 8 touchdowns is a lot, and that's something that John Ross has never been able to be like an 8 touchdown guy or really even that level of a deep threat. I do have some interesting stats on Darius Slayton as a deep threat in 2020 and the way that he was utilized in Jason Garrett's offense, which was kind of as the exclusive deep threat of the offense, which made the Giants' offense very predictable. Nobody else was really going vertical the way that Darius Slayton was, and that's shown in the target total. For 20-plus yard passes, Darius Slayton had 21 targets of such kind. So 21 targets, 20-plus yards downfield. Evan Engram had 9. Golden Tate had 7, and Sterling Shepard had 8. So the only one who was getting consistent deep targets was Darius Slayton. Made the Giants' offense very predictable. But that's also because they didn't have any other vertical threat on the field except maybe you could say Evan Engram, but we all know how poorly utilized Evan Engram's skill set was last season. So Sterling Shepard is not a deep threat. Golden Tate's not a deep threat. Darius Slayton was their only real deep threat wide receiver on the roster last year. So he did get 21-plus deep targets, the only one who got double-digit deep targets. Makes sense, but makes the Giants' offense really predictable. But now you look ahead to 2021. Kenny Galladay is the WR1, and he is top 3 deep threat in the NFL. He's going to have the lion's share of those 20-plus yard targets. But Darius Slayton might also get a lot of 20-plus yard targets just because he was able to do that pretty well last season, and that's really what he's good at is going vertical. So now the Giants have 2 solid vertical threats. I mean, John Ross doesn't really work into this equation, in my opinion, because he is more of the after-the-catch guy and speed guy, and to me, I think that he's now more of Kadarius Toney's backup. It's actually funny we've gone this deep into the video without mentioning Kadarius Toney, but that's because the Giants actually have quite a bit of talent at wide receiver now. Kadarius Toney is more going to be that slot guy, that speed guy, that after-the-catch guy. I don't see John Ross really fitting into the equation except being a depth piece for a deep threat or an after-the-catch guy. So with Darius Slayton and Kenny Galladay working in tandem, you have 2 guys who can get vertical and 2 guys who will get a lot of vertical targets and deep 20-plus yard targets downfield, which will then open things up underneath for Sterling Shepard, for Evan Engram, and for Kadarius Toney within the 10 to 20-yard range. The 20-plus yard range, though, I think those targets are going to be dominated by Kenny Galladay and then, of course, complemented by Darius Slayton.
I would say that inherently, though, Darius Slayton's snap count is bound to decrease this upcoming year, unless the Giants are running 4 receiver sets every single play. You know what I mean? We know Jason Garrett loves to use 12 personnel. We know he loves to use 2 tight ends, which means there's only going to be 2 receivers on the field at times. It's going to be Kenny Galladay, Sterling Shepard, or Kadarius Toney. Darius Slayton is going to see his snaps decreasing. And I'll tell you what, last year he had, 94 targets, and his snaps, he had 114 in the slot and 469 out wide. Now, we know Sterling Shepard can play out wide. He did it the past 2 years predominantly. Kenny Galladay is purely an X receiver. He can move inside too occasionally, but traditionally he's an X receiver. And Kadarius Toney is the slot guy. Darius Slayton is going to probably take a back seat to those 3 primary targets. I'm not going to say I'd still say he's considered a starting receiver because he is the opposite wideout if you're playing, four. But I also want to say, I wonder if Kadarius Toney's reps are affected by Sterling Shepard. I wonder if the Giants are looking to push Sterling Shepard back inside. Now, what do you think about that? Because that's another question. Is Kadarius Toney going to be an every down player this upcoming year?
I don't think so. And I think that the point about Darius Slayton's target share or snap count really decreasing is valid. He's going to lose a lot of snaps because he's not really a starting wide receiver at this point. But what I was saying with the vertical threat thing is you don't just have one vertical threat on the field anymore for the Giants. You can now have two. You can have two guys go vertical on the outside, which opens things up a lot in the middle of the field for two slot receivers or one slot and one tight end. Just having two guys who can go vertical, Slayton and Galladay, will make the Giants offense a lot less predictable, a lot more creative, and a lot more vertical, just more vertical passing concepts, just because you have two guys who can go vertical. And I think that's where you open up the offense, even though Darius Slayton isn't playing a starting role. Now with Kadarius Toney, I think him and Sterling Shepard are going to be competing for snaps. Shepard being the long-term veteran who we know is a really solid route runner, dependable receiver. Is he going to play outside? Is he going to play in the slot? Is he going to travel around? He's probably going to travel around, but where will he be primarily? If he's playing primarily outside, he's taking snaps away from Darius Slayton. If he's playing primarily inside, he's taking snaps away from Kadarius Toney. So what I think the Giants are going to do is rotate Sterling Shepard to both of those spots while also rotating Slayton and Kadarius Toney into both of those spots, which allows all four of those guys to see a real nice share of targets and a nice share of snaps on the field. So you get Kadarius Toney playing half of the snaps in the slot and Sterling Shepard's playing half of the snaps in the slot, and then you have Sterling Shepard playing half of the snaps out wide as well, while Darius Slayton plays the other half of those snaps out wide. So then you really get Sterling Shepard playing a lot of snaps on the field, and then you get really a reduced role from Darius Slayton, and you get Kadarius Toney worked into the lineup in year one, and then in year two, I think next year, 2022, that's when you see the Giants really unlock Kadarius Toney's skill set, probably move on from Sterling Shepard as his cap hit increases while his age also increases and production decreases. That's when you see Kadarius Toney take that step forward. Personally, I think next season is when we unlock Kadarius Toney, though he will be a really solid player in year one, I believe. And there's a chance that he plays so well when he is on the field that he starts taking snaps away from Shepard or taking snaps away from Slayton. That's also possible. But all of those things are going to work hand in hand. Those three players are all going to be really just sharing snaps together and trying to build an offense that's really a passing by committee, receiving by committee in that regard.
It's kind of crazy to me that Darius Slayton went from an every down player for the Giants. He had 877 total snaps last year. It went from that to arguably not even a starter. That's how much the Giants upgraded this unit this offseason in terms of just adding more depth and starting quality pieces. But the way I also see the Giants utilizing this is I think that they're going to run a lot of dual sets with Sterling Shepard and Kadarius Toney in the X, and, the Z in the slot formation. I think that they're going to use them side by side. I think that also the idea of rotating them a lot is going to be really beneficial for this offense, because what does that do? What does rotating receivers do to a defense? Well, one, if you have somebody, let's say you have a corner, and he's taking on Darius Slayton and Sterling Shepard constantly. They're just rotating these guys, depending on the play. It's going to cause a lot of confusion for a cornerback, trying to figure out what exactly they are doing, on a play-by-play basis. Is Darius Slayton pushing it deep? Is Sterling Shepard running a slant? Is he running a quick zig? What is he doing? How are you supposed to manage two players? They're just constantly rotating, very different qualities, different speeds, different tempos, different breaks in their routes. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how the Giants create confusion, because defensive coordinators do this too on the defensive line. They rotate pass rushers to catch offensive tackles off guard, to not allow them to see what's coming, just to create that confusion, create that mystery. And I think the Giants will do something similar, and running Kadarius Toney and Sterling Shepard side by side is going to be so fun to watch, because those two guys are so good at the beginning of routes and really faking cornerbacks into making preemptive decisions of whether they're going to be going outside, whether they're going to be going inside, if they're going to be turning around. Very quick twitch capabilities. Both of those guys are phenomenal in the short route concepts, and I think that it's going to help the Giants tremendously. in terms of keeping defensive backs on their heels, not really sure what they're doing. And then you're going to put Darius Slayton in there and run him deep, and they're expecting something short, intermediate. Their body, they've already created some sort of muscle memory throughout the game. They're expecting short, expecting intermediate, and then Darius Slayton's, maybe running an out and up, or he's running, he's running a seam route from the slot. He's doing something interesting, or a spray fade. It's going to create a lot of confusion for opposing defenses, and I can't wait to see how they use the rotation to their benefit, because I think that's really how they should be approaching it. It shouldn't be one player's losing reps. It's no, we're using this to our advantage to create mismatches, to create confusion, and that's part of our game plan. So that way the players don't see this as, oh, I'm being punished or I'm losing snaps. It's no, this is part of the game plan to maximize when you're on the field, right? Because at the end of the day, Darius Slayton spent 877 snaps last year on the field and didn't do much with it, right? Like, it doesn't matter how many plays you're on the field if your production isn't actually what it needs to be. If you have, if he has half the amount of reps, but he has the same amount of receiving yards, 751 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns, if he has those same statistics and half the amount of snaps, because when he's on the field, they're actually maximizing his qualities, then it's okay. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how they get him the ball, as long as he's productive when he's on the field. The problem is, last year, when he was on the field, Jason Garrett was running him in just very basic route concepts. Cornerbacks knew exactly what he was doing. Obviously, as a receiver, you get demoralized when you're running the same routes over and over again, and you have no choice. It's not up to you to run the routes. It's not up to you to decide which route you're running, so you're just following orders. And when you're running the same thing over and over and over again, you kind of just get burnt out. You're like, well, they're not doing anything to help me succeed. And I think that's kind of plays into the psyche of a receiver. You need to feed them, You need to feed them consistently. That's why the best receiver in the game, very momentum based. You watch DeAndre Hopkins, you watch Julio Jones, OBJ, they get better as the game goes on. They get better as you feed them targets, get them into space, devise route concepts that maximize their qualities. If you're a possession receiver, if you're a speed guy, if you're an electric receiver like OBJ who can take it to the house, you can give him a short crossing route and he'll take it up the sideline for 7, So that's kind of the idea, is like you have to maximize a player when he's on the field, and it doesn't matter how many reps they are, how many snaps they're enjoying. It's about what they're doing when they are on the field. So I think that's kind of the step that Darius Slayton needs to take. Doesn't matter how many snaps he has, as long as they are producing when he is available. So, Anthony, how do you see defenses reacting to this Giants offense? When we're talking about being more downfield centric, when you have Kenny Golladay at the X, do you expect defenses to be playing a lot more two deep safeties? Because now we have some speed. Is this going to help take guys out of the box? Or do you think that they're going to try and run a cover 1 against us and hope that, maybe we just don't have that same wide receiver success that we did last year, and maybe just overwhelm the offensive line and hope that Daniel Jones doesn't have the time in the pocket anymore?
So I think that's interesting in terms of what coverage we predict that defenses are going to play against the Giants, because last year, I've done, in preparation for this film breakdown that I'm doing on Daniel Jones, I dove into every single 20-plus yard pass attempt by Daniel Jones. And one of the main takeaways that I had from that is that the Giants really didn't like to go vertical unless they had a single high safety look. They really only like to attack those single high, those cover 3s and those cover 1s. They only liked one-on-one coverages. It was really rare that you saw Daniel Jones throw into a different type of coverage than that. I'll even pull up some stats for that right here. So single coverage looks, 42 throws against single coverage looks, which was 79% of his deep passes. 68% of them were single high safety looks pre-snap. So pretty much all of them were against single coverage, single high safety looks. And it's reaffirmed when you look at his kept clean stats when he wasn't pressured. He had 86% of his passes when kept clean on 20-plus yard attempts go to single coverage looks. So in terms of what the Giants did in 2020, knowing that they didn't have a lot of talent at wide receiver, they were very particular about when they decided to throw the ball deep. And the only times that they were feeling comfortable enough to throw the ball deep was when they could have single coverage, a one-on-one look with a single high safety, because they know that they don't have the talent at wide receiver or maybe the speed at wide receiver to try and manipulate some double safety looks or try and move some safeties out of position and create and manufacture open looks downfield. So for the most part, what the Giants' 20-plus yard passes were last year where when you had a guy one-on-one outside and you threw up a 50-50 ball, but you threw a really good pass, so Daniel Jones made it more catchable, made it more like a 70-30 ball. That's how the Giants were manufacturing their 20-plus yard passes. And I think this next season it's going to be really interesting because that sounds exactly like Kenny Golladay. That's exactly what he's good at, is doing that 70-30 ball, those single coverage, one-on-one looks outside. But as you now have a lot more talent on this roster, I don't think that the Giants are pigeonholed into using just one guy going downfield against one cornerback. I think that you can run a lot more routes. Like, you think back to week 1 of the 2020 season when the Giants ran that 41-yard touchdown pass to Darius Slayton. So what they had was Evan Engram on the over, and then they had Darius Slayton on the post route. And they were manipulating the cover one, a single high look, but it was different because you did have two options going downfield. You weren't relying on one go route to throw a 50-50 ball on. You were actually manufacturing, using the speed of Evan Engram over the middle to draw down that single high safety, while you have the speed of Darius Slayton go over top and get past that single high safety, creating an open opportunity in the middle of the end zone for a big touchdown. I think you see more plays like that rather than a play like, let's think to Golden Tate's touchdown against Philadelphia on the Thursday night game, where he's really just running a go from a seam route, basically just a slot fade, and he catches it, and he's got like a cornerback draped all over him, and it's like a ridiculous catch and throw. Those plays are really hard to replicate. Daniel Jones was able to replicate them a few times, but those are difficult. The plays like Evan Engram's over and then the Darius Slayton post, that touchdown pass, those are easier to replicate because they're built in with the scheme. It's a scheme-made opportunity to go vertical, and it also relies on speed and talent from a receiving perspective, and plus Daniel Jones throwing a good pass, getting it over those safeties. So I think that you see more of those scheme-based ones. You don't see many of those 50-50 balls. You see those to Kenny Golladay. But now that you have Kenny Golladay and Darius Slayton, I think that you can open up the offense and have some fabricated scheme-based deep shots where you get guys open based on the scheme. And I think that's all going to work together really well and just open up the offense and open up the vertical attack far more than the Giants were able to do last season with the talent that they had on their roster.
And I think Darius Slayton elevates people around him. When he is healthy, when he's playing well, when they're utilizing him correctly, the attention
kills.
He commands.
Speed kills.
That's what that's exactly what Dave Gettleman said. Speed kills. And when you're running those post and ups and you're creating space in the secondary, it allows players like Evan Engram to use those overs, to use those deep outs. And there's pockets of space where Darius Slayton leaves guys in his dust. You know what I mean? So I think that his ability downfield does open up the field underneath. It opens up the seams. It opens up the boundaries. And I think Kenny Golladay is going to have a similar effect, maybe not as the speed threat, but as a possession receiver who commands a lot of attention. You sometimes can't play man coverage on Kenny Golladay because of his catch radius. You might have to play more zone coverage. You might have to force Daniel Jones to make the throws and not just throw it in his direction, if that makes sense. So I think we're going to see a lot more zone coverage against the Giants next year. I don't think you can play man coverage against the Giants next year with a lot of these big body receivers. You can't sometimes manage their speed. Evan Engram in man coverage, he will beat you in man coverage. Kenny Golladay in man coverage, he will beat you. Sterling Shepard will beat you in man coverage. Kadarius Toney will break your ankles in man coverage. Darius Slayton will beat you in man coverage if you're... And we're talking now, Darius Slayton is not facing off against CB1s and CB2s anymore. He's facing up against CB3s, maybe slot corners, maybe CB2s, but never the top corner on an opposing team. So I think that's going to be a major benefit for him as well. I know Sterling Shepard, they tried to kind of activate him in the slot, get him into different positions, and he faced off against CB1, CB2s kind of interchangeably, but so did Darius Slayton. It's going to help him tremendously. So I'm really excited to see how the Giants utilize this new bevy of receiving talent that they added this offseason, guys. But let us know what you think below. Do you think that Darius Slayton is being left behind? To answer your question, we don't think so. We just think the way they use him is going to change. And really, hopefully they maximize his talents and don't just send him out there to run go routes or comeback routes every single play. The occasional slant, they knew what was coming before it even happened. So hopefully they can create some confusion. They can rotate guys, really put defensive backs on their heels and maximize what he has to offer. So I'm excited about that potential. But guys, make sure to subscribe below on YouTube, turn on notifications for Apple and Spotify, and hopefully you enjoyed this video. We'll have some other stuff coming out this week, of course. I know we have a couple of weeks here where it's kind of a dead period, but we'll still be churning out content for you guys, coming out with cool topics. So hopefully you guys will tune in for those and stay knowledgeable about this team as we head toward training camp. But have an awesome rest of your weekend. We'll catch you guys tomorrow.